WHMIS labels are part of the Workplace Hazardous Materials Information System. Their purpose is to alert workers to the hazards of controlled products and the procedures for working with them, and to direct workers to the second part of the WHMIS information system, the Material Safety Data Sheet. In this module, you will be introduced to the 3 types of WHMIS labeling. You will learn about the responsibilities for developing and applying the labels, and details about their design and content. The 3 types of WHMIS labeling are the supplier label, the workplace label, and other means of identification. The supplier of any controlled products manufactured, processed, packaged, imported, or sold in Canada has a basic responsibility to provide and apply, as a condition of sale, WHMIS supplier labels. The employer must develop and apply workplace labels to various containers of controlled products in the workplace. For example, on storage tanks which hold a controlled product produced on-site, or on portable storage containers into which contents have been transferred from a supplier container. In some circumstances, the employer is permitted to use another means of identification, such as color or number codes, and warning signs to ensure that workers recognize the presence of a controlled product. Employers must make sure that all workers who work with or near controlled products recognize and understand supplier labels, workplace labels, and other means of identification used in the workplace, and are trained in the procedures for the safe storage, handling, use, and disposal of products, as well as procedures to follow in the event of an emergency. Workers, in turn, must learn the information provided by employers, read and understand the label before using the product, and follow safe work procedures. There are 7 WHMIS information categories which must appear on a typical WHMIS supplier label: the product identifier, supplier identifier, reference to the MSDS, hazard symbols, risk phrases, precautionary measures, and first aid measures. The product identifier is the product name. The name on the label must be identical to the product identifier on the Material Safety Data Sheet. The supplier identifier includes the supplier, manufacturer, or importer's name, and the location of the principal place of business. A reference to the data sheet, such as See Material Safety Data Sheet, must appear on the WHMIS supplier label when a Material Safety Data Sheet is required. WHMIS hazard symbols must have a distinctive circular border and must be displayed in a color that won't be confused with transportation of dangerous goods safety marks. For example, the TDG color for the explosive symbol is orange. Therefore, no WHMIS symbol may be orange because WHMIS does not include explosives. The risk phrase must use wording that clearly indicates the risks associated with the product's use. The precautionary measures for the safe handling, use, and storage of hazardous materials must be clearly indicated. The first aid measures must describe immediate first aid steps to be taken in the event of harmful contact with the product. Supplier labels must be designed for durability. Letters, numbers, and borders must be in a color that contrasts distinctly from other markings on the container. Supplier labels must be in both English and French. Most require this distinctive border design. Depending on the size and type of container, all or some of the 7 main categories will be included on supplier labels. Controlled products entering the typical workplace that are over 100 milliliters in volume require all 7 categories on the supplier labels. For containers of 100 milliliters or less in size, supplier labels must display at a minimum 4 categories: the product identifier, supplier identifier, a material safety data sheet statement, and hazard symbols. Suppliers usually transport products in single containers, multi-containers, or in bulk. If the product is in a single container, the supplier is responsible for ensuring that it is received with the appropriate label applied. When inner containers are used in a multi-container shipment, the supplier must apply labels to inner as well as outer containers, unless an arrangement is made in writing with the purchaser to apply the supplier's labels to the inner containers. When a multi-container shipment requires a TDG label for transport, the supplier does not have to provide a WHMIS label on the outer container as long as all inner containers bear appropriate labels. For bulk shipments, the supplier need not apply a supplier label to the bulk container. However, the supplier must provide either a supplier label or alternative labeling information to the employer when the product is received. The alternative labeling information, for example, could be on the material safety data sheet. Although suppliers have the basic responsibility to provide and apply labels, the bottom line is that employers are responsible for ensuring that no controlled product is used or handled without the labels required from the supplier. If a controlled product is received from a supplier without a proper label, it may be stored while the employer is actively seeking supplier label information. Where the employer imports a controlled product from another country for use in the employer's workplace only, the employer is considered the supplier and therefore must develop and apply a supplier label for the product. Workplace labels are another type of WHMIS label. They're used in a variety of situations in the workplace to fulfill WHMIS labeling requirements. Workplace labels must be provided, for example, if an existing supplier label becomes illegible or is accidentally removed and a replacement supplier label is not available. Employers must provide workplace labels for storage containers of controlled products produced in the workplace, or when contents are transferred from a supplier container to a portable container. Exceptions to this rule are portable containers filled directly from a labeled container. They will have to be under the control of the worker who transferred the product to the new container for use on the same shift. In this case, a means of identifying the contents of the container will do. The format for workplace labels is flexible, as long as the three basic types of information appear: the product identifier, safe handling information, and the fact that a material safety data sheet is available. The product identifier on the workplace label must be identical to the product identifier in the corresponding material safety data sheet. Information for safe handling states the precautions necessary to reduce health risks or injury. Hazard information can be provided instead as long as workers are trained in the necessary precautions. If a material safety data sheet is available, a statement to that effect must be included. Although not specifically required by WHMIS, the design of workplace labels may include WHMIS hazard symbols and the distinctive border used for supplier labels for better communication with the workforce. The workplace label may be in the language of choice in the workplace. Non-WHMIS symbols may be used with workplace labels, as long as the information presented does not result in worker misunderstanding of the hazards. For example, if a label system provided a number or letter rating based on acute effects only, then the employer would have to take steps to ensure that workers knew about any likelihood of that product causing chronic toxic effects. In certain cases, workplace labels need not be used. Other means of visual identification will do, such as product names, color or number codes, placards, and even piping diagrams. These other means must be used in combination with worker education to ensure that workers are able to identify contents. Other means of identification may be used to identify locations where workplace hazardous waste produced in the workplace are stored, to identify controlled product transfer systems, such as pipes or conveyor belts, the contents of reaction or process vessels, or to identify the contents of portable containers that are filled directly from a labeled container and will be under the control of the worker who transferred the product to the new container for use on the same shift. In laboratories, some modification of general labeling requirements will be permitted. For example, supplier labels for controlled products from laboratory supply houses do not need the distinctive supplier label border or hazard symbols if they are packaged in less than 10 kilogram quantities and intended for use in a laboratory. However, the label must disclose a product identifier, risk phrases, precautionary measures, first aid measures, and, where an MSDS is available, a statement to that effect. Suppliers of such chemicals are required to provide an MSDS, except where the label discloses all the information required on the MSDS. Supplier labels for laboratory samples packaged in less than 10 kilogram quantities and for which no MSDS is available must display the distinctive WHMIS label border and disclose the product identifier, supplier identifier, the identity of ingredients when they are known, and an emergency telephone number. Portable containers filled from supplier containers, as well as products produced in a laboratory for research and development work in the same lab, do not need a workplace label, only a means of product identification. That covers the basic information required for the implementation of a WHMIS labeling program. The job at hand now is to review the information in relation to controlled products in your workplace. Do all controlled products entering your workplace have supplier labels as required? Are the necessary categories of information included in the supplier label? Are supplier labels in good condition, particularly those on containers of products that have been in the workplace for some time? What about the labels developed for your workplace? Are the correct information categories included on the workplace label? Is the information up to date? What about other means of identification used in your workplace? Do the current methods clearly indicate the identity of controlled products to workers? Are workers properly trained in WHMIS labeling requirements, in how to read labels, and do they understand other means of identification? The answer to all these questions must be yes. WHMIS and WHMIS Labels for a safer and healthier workplace.